Abraham Lincoln. And here's where it gets heavy. The country wasn't just divided, it was tearing itself apart. The Civil War wasn't some distant battlefield story, it was constant. Reports coming in daily. Thousands die every week. Letters from grieving families are piling up. Every decision Lincoln made cost lives. And then, right in the middle of all that chaos, something personal hit harder than anything political ever could. His 11-year-old son, Willie, fell sick inside the White House. At first, it probably felt like something manageable, but it wasn't. The illness got worse, and on February 20th, 1862, his son was gone. This part breaks you when you really think about it. Lincoln, this tall, composed leader the country looked up to, was seen completely shattered. He buried his face in his hands, crying as any father would. But here's the brutal contrast. The next day, the war didn't stop. No pause, no time to grieve properly. He had to walk back into meetings, decisions, strategy, while carrying that loss inside him. People even said he would lock himself away and cry alone for hours. And if you look deeper, this wasn't new for him. Lincoln had always struggled with deep sadness, what people back then called melancholy, something we'd now recognize as depression. So imagine that weight stacking up. A nation is collapsing, a war is killing thousands, and now his own child is gone. What would you have done at that moment? Because this wasn't just a president under pressure, this was a father trying not to completely break, while the entire world depended on him holding it together. Franklin D. Roosevelt. It started like any normal day. Then the call came in. Japan had launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. No warning, no buildup, just chaos. Ships burning, planes destroyed, over 2,400 Americans gone in hours. You can almost imagine the silence in that room when Roosevelt heard it. Because at that moment, he knew. This wasn't just an attack. This was war, not a small conflict, not something contained, a global war. And here's the thing, just days before, the US was still trying to stay out of it, still focused on recovering from the Great Depression. But now, that entire reality was gone. The next day, he stood in front of Congress and delivered what became known as the Day of Infamy speech. Calm voice, steady tone, but behind that, pressure most people can't even imagine. Because now it was on him to protect a nation, to lead millions into war, to carry the fear of what comes next. Because this wasn't leadership anymore. This was stepping into a storm you can't control. John F. Kennedy. But wait, this might be the closest the world ever came to ending. It started with photos, not explosions, not attacks, just images showing Soviet nuclear missiles sitting in Cuba. And suddenly, everything changed. Because those missiles, they could hit American cities in minutes. No time to react, no second chances. For 13 days, the world held its breath. Every move mattered, every message, every delay, it all carried the risk of nuclear war. And Kennedy? He was right in the center of it. This part is insane when you think about it. One decision, just one, could trigger millions of deaths. Attack the missiles, war starts instantly. Do nothing, the threat stays. So what do you choose? That was the pressure sitting on his shoulders every single day. Meetings stretched for hours, tension everywhere. Nobody knew how this would end. And the craziest part? Even a small mistake, a misunderstanding, a wrong signal could have wiped out entire cities. Because this wasn't politics anymore. This was deciding whether the world survives or doesn't. Lyndon B. Johnson. And this is where things start slipping. Slowly, then all at once. The Vietnam War wasn't supposed to spiral like this. At first it was controlled, limited, manageable, but then it kept growing. More troops were sent, more bodies are coming back, more names added to the list, and the worst part? There was no clear end. Every report felt worse than the last. The Tet Offensive shattered any illusion that the US was winning, and suddenly the entire country started turning against the war. Protests exploded across cities, students marching, crowds shouting. The pressure wasn't just overseas anymore, it was right outside his door. But here's what really hits. Privately, Johnson knew things weren't working. He felt it, the doubt, the regret, but publicly, he had to keep going, keep defending it, keep sending troops. Imagine carrying that contradiction every single day. And then came the moment. March 31st, 1968, he goes on national television and drops it. He won't run again. Just like that. No campaign, no fight. Because deep down, the war hadn't just divided the country. It had broken him too. Richard Nixon. But wait, this one didn't come from war. It came from inside. At first, Watergate looked small, just a break-in, something political, but then it kept growing, piece by piece. The truth started coming out, investigations, testimonies, and then the tapes, recordings from inside the White House itself. And suddenly, it wasn't speculation anymore. It was proof that the president had been involved. And this is where everything collapses. Impeachment wasn't a possibility anymore, it was inevitable. The pressure closed in from every direction. Congress, media, public trust, gone. Behind that controlled, calm public image, everything was unraveling. And then came August 8th, 1974. He steps in front of the nation and resigns. No fight, no denial left. The first, and still the only, U.S. president to ever do it. Think about that for a second. The most powerful man in the world, forced to walk away. And the next morning, as he left the White House, he raised his hands one last time. That familiar gesture. But this time, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the end. So what's your take on this one? Was it pressure or consequences catching up? Jimmy Carter. And this is where everything went wrong. Fast. The Iran hostage crisis had already stretched on for months. Americans held captive. Pressure is building every single day. Carter needed a breakthrough. So he approved something risky. Operation Eagle Claw, a secret rescue mission deep inside Iran. But the moment it began, it started falling apart. Helicopters failing midair, a massive sandstorm hits out of nowhere, confusion, delays, and then the worst part, a collision in the desert, fire, chaos. 8 American servicemen were killed. Just like that, the mission was over. And here's what stands out. He didn't hide. He came out and took full responsibility. No excuses, but you could feel it. This wasn't just a failed mission, it was a moment that crushed trust, damaged his presidency, and stayed with him long after. So let me ask you, do you risk everything for a chance, or live with not trying? Ronald Reagan. But this one, the whole world watched it happen. It was supposed to be a moment of pride. A space shuttle launch, live on TV, classrooms watching across the country, and then 73 seconds in, it explodes, right there in the sky. 7 astronauts were gone instantly, including a school teacher on board. You can't even process it in real time. Celebration turns into silence. Shock spreads everywhere. And Reagan? He had to step in, not as a politician, but as someone speaking to a grieving nation. No spin, no strategy, just emotion. That speech later that day, it hit differently. Calm, steady, but heavy. Because in moments like this, there's nothing to fix. No action to undo it, just loss. Because that day didn't just stop a mission, it stopped the entire country in its tracks. George W. Bush. And then everything changed in a single whisper. He was sitting in a classroom, listening to kids read. Normal morning, cameras rolling. Then his chief of staff leaned in and said it quietly. America is under attack. And you can see it on his face, that shift. He doesn't panic. Don't jump up. But inside, everything just flipped. Because while he's still sitting there, planes are hitting towers, buildings collapsing, thousands of lives disappearing in real time. No time to process, no time to prepare, and suddenly, it's all on him. That's the part people don't think about. One moment, you're reading with kids. Next moment, you're leading a country under attack. Within hours, he's addressing the nation, promising action, signaling war. That calm president, gone. Replaced by a wartime leader overnight. So ask yourself, how do you even think clearly when the world is falling apart that fast? Barack Obama. And this one, it hits differently. Not politics, not war, just pure tragedy. An elementary school, kids, classrooms. Then, gunfire. 20 children, 6 adults, gone. And you can tell, this one broke through everything. Because when Obama stepped up to speak, something changed. His voice slowed, his face tightened, and then he couldn't hold it. He paused, wiped his tears. Not as a president, as a father. This part stays with you. He had faced global crises, wars, and pressure from every direction. But this was different. There's no strategy here, no solution that fixes that kind of loss. And later, he called it one of the darkest days of his presidency. Have you ever seen a leader drop that guard like that? Because in that moment, you weren't watching power. You were watching a human being, completely shaken. George H.W. Bush. And this one isn't about what happened, it's about the decision before it. Because going to war, that weight hits before the first shot is even fired. Iraq invades Kuwait, tension builds fast, and now Bush has to decide, step in or let it spiral. Sounds simple, it's not, because every option comes with a cost. Lives, global stability, long-term consequences nobody can fully predict. And this is where it gets real. He's not just thinking about today, he's thinking about what happens in months, years, decades later. Coalition forces ready, pressure is building worldwide, and then he makes the call. Operation Desert Storm begins. But here's the thing people forget, even when a war goes right, it doesn't feel like a win. Because behind every decision like that, there's a quiet question that never really leaves. Was it worth it?